Most of us spend a lot of time looking outside of ourselves for answers that we're always going to have to come from within. Be your own fucking guru. That's what this series is about. I'm Ryan Paul McGuigan. This is Beneath the Noise. In the last episode, we talked about how much we lose touch with ourselves, the roles that arrived and accumulated, the expectations that became ours without our ever agreeing to them. The way it all happens gradually in the ordinary run of things, without any visible signs that there's anything to take notice of. This episode is about what's been happening underneath all of that the whole time. In episode 1, I named 7 things: self-worth, self-esteem, self-acceptance, self-love, self-belief, self-confidence, and self-trust. And I said that when someone gets to the point of feeling like they need a guru, then that tends to point to something that has eroded in one or more of those 7 things. I want to come back to those now, because this episode is about how that happens. And the first thing worth saying about it is that nobody does it to us deliberately. Nobody sets out to erode these things in us. The people responsible, if you can even call them that, are mostly just doing their best. But it starts early, earlier than most people think to look. And it's so innocuous, certainly back then for our generation, that you wouldn't have batted an eyelid when it was happening. And most wouldn't these days either. Our parents, or whoever raised us, were trying to do right by us from the start. Keep us safe, guide us, set us up for the world. And in doing all of that, things get communicated that nobody intended to communicate. Something as simple as a parent saying, "Be a good boy and eat your dinner." Completely innocent, said 1,000 times in 1,000 households. But a young child doesn't hear, "Please eat your dinner." A young child can hear, "I'm a good boy when I do what I'm told, and something else when I don't." The behaviour and the self get tangled up. And that tangle, repeated across years in 1,000 different variations, starts doing something to how that child sees themselves. And I'm not singling out the parents here at all. I grew up in a home where I was loved and well looked after. The point is more that this is just how it works. Children absorb everything. Then you have the more delicate issue of disciplining a child from no age to well into their teens. They don't have the filter yet to separate "I did something wrong" from "I am something wrong." That filter takes years to develop, and even then, it's not reliable. During the school years, and I think most people have a memory or 3 from school that still sticks with them even decades later, I've been in a classroom where a teacher has lost the head at a student. I've been that student on countless occasions. But when you strip back what happened, what had the student actually done? Talked to their friend at the wrong moment, forgot their book, came in late, maybe through no fault of their own, and now they're being made to feel useless, or that something is inherently wrong with them in front of everyone. I'm not saying the teacher is a bad person or that this is deliberate. Maybe they're just under pressure or frustrated, having a bad day. They're only human after all. But the child happened to be in the way of it at a time when patience was wearing thin. And that child goes home carrying something, a small additional piece of evidence that they're not quite good enough, that they're the kind of person who gets things wrong. And as I say, it doesn't take much, but it accumulates in wee deposits over years. And then there's the social layer, the business of trying to belong, to fit in, to be accepted, which starts as soon as a child is around other children, with siblings or cousins, in the playground, in the classroom. Secondary school is where it tends to intensify, but it's been running long before that. And for a lot of people, it really never stops. I've worked with people who've described what I can only call an exhausting performance. Being anxious in social situations, but haven't learned to hide it completely. Situations that you're forced to be in for work and stuff rather than they've chosen. In crowds, around random people they don't know well or that they're meeting for the first time. They show up and they're talkative and engaged and apparently perfectly at ease, when on the inside, it's the opposite. They're afraid. They're afraid they'll say something, the wrong thing, not come across as interesting enough, or they'll just completely freeze and not know what to say in the moment. And then when they get home and they close the door behind them, they're absolutely wiped. The energy it's taken to maintain that appearance for a few hours has just drained them completely. That's a performance. It's driven by a fear underneath that we aren't enough. And it's no wonder it's exhausting. The gap between how you actually feel and how you're presenting yourself has to be actively managed. The gap doesn't close on its own, and maintaining it year after year does something to your relationship with yourself. In recent times, social media has intensified a version of this. People curating their life highlights, the holidays and the achievements, and the carefully presented image of a life going well. I've done it too. Posted about the golf rounds and the trips and the good moments, while keeping a lot else behind closed doors, because it would contradict the picture I wanted people to see. That's a version of the same performance, just with a wider audience. And behind it is the same basic fear that the full picture, the unedited version, wouldn't be enough. That fear is worth a pause for thought, because it's at the root of a lot of this. The adjustments people make, the masks they wear for different audiences, the things they keep to themselves, it all tends to come down to some version of, if people saw the real me, they mightn't like what they found, might not accept it, might pull back. And the consequences of that seem unbearable. And at some point, that fear stops being a response to the outside world and starts being a voice on the inside. That's a shift that needs articulating and saying out loud. The external conditioning, the parents, the teachers, the social environment, does its work early. But at some point, we don't need any of that to tell us how things are. The voice has been absorbed. It's ours now, or at least it feels like ours. The inner critic running its commentary, telling us that we're not quite ready, that we're probably going to get it wrong, that other people seem to manage this better than we do. Nobody is saying that to us from the outside. We're saying it to ourselves. And once that's happening, something else starts to follow. Without realizing, we start looking for evidence that confirms that the voice is already saying. A setback that someone with a strong self-belief would shake off and move on from lands differently compared to when your self-belief is already fragile. It doesn't just feel like a setback, it feels like proof. The lens is in place. I call it the shit-tinted glasses. And new experiences get filtered through them. And that's how it keeps going, without anyone doing anything. The outside world doesn't need to keep piling on. The internal process is doing the work on its own. And all of this, the early messages absorbed before we had the language to question them, the meaning we gave them, the adjustments made to belong, the performance maintained to be accepted, the voice that moved inside and kept running. It all goes on underneath the surface of a life that can look completely fine. The job is there, the responsibilities are being met. Nobody looking from the outside would see it, which is exactly why most people have never stopped to name it. It just becomes the background, the water they swim in, the way things are. And that's the thing about something that wears down gradually. There's no moment to point to. No morning you wake up and think, right, that's it, something's gone. It happens in the ordinary run of things, through small deposits of years. And at some point, the result of all that just starts to feel like you. The self-worth that's quieter than it once was. The self-belief that hesitates where it used to move. The self-acceptance that's silently being outsourced. All of it worn down so gradually that most people wouldn't even describe it that way. They'd just say that's how they are. What it actually feels like on the inside to be carrying all this, that quiet sense that something isn't right, even when everything else looks fine and as it should be. That's what the next episode is about. Thanks for listening to Beneath the Noise. If something in this landed for you, pass it on to someone you think could use it. And the next episode is there when you're ready.